going on YouTube? Thanks for tuning back into another video. Today's also a segment onto the Integra engine bay. On the last one you actually saw us working on the CRX a little bit in the beginning, finishing off with the video showing that the primer got laid. Now, if you didn't really catch on too much on what we did on that video, on that last portion of it, the primer was laid down as a heavy coat to see what little tiny scratches could be filled, and aside from what could be filled, it could also show a little bit better what body work still needs to be done. So for the next couple days, we're gonna have Vince come back, or in the next couple days, and he's gonna be doing a lot of the other body work that actually stands out, and I thought it's one uniform color. And until he gets here to do those final stages, those final bodywork parts, there are a few other things that I did want to do to the engine bay while we're at it. Spoon, if you're watching this, Spoon86 or 860, if I'm not mistaken, on Instagram, you've been on my back, bro. I'm gonna put the end caps on. That being said, if you guys aren't familiar with end caps for the frames, a lot of these Honda guys, and myself included, when we build these cars, we remove the front face, the radiator core support or whatever. You guys saw me make the tubular one, and you have already seen this in the channel a couple years ago, make the weight plate to hold the bottom of the frame. The portion where it attaches the frame to the weight plate, let me take the camera off the tripod and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about, uses these little 3 holes which have threaded nuts on the back, and they're accessible right over here, but from the factory you have core support that stands in front of here. When we build these cars, normally we take it off for extra room, and you have this ugly patch of exposed area. All these holes, for the most part, are what the OEM spot welds are held onto the front face with. Then there's a few threaded holes for other things that gets used with the OEM setup. But basically what we're going to be doing right now is cutouts on a piece of mild steel, just weldable steel, a 9x3 plate for each side. Onto those plates, we're going to add a little hole to that part right there and that part right there. That way we can use the mount that we made for the headlights, the floating tubular mounts. And aside from that, we're going to be basically cutting off these side lips and being able to weld on a nice flush plate right there, giving us about 3/4 of an inch extra right there, as well as that. But more importantly than the extra clearance, we're gonna have a lot cleaner of a look, because this is really a sore thumb when it comes to a nice clean engine bay. Although with the front end, you're not really gonna be noticing something like that, especially since it's so low on the engine bay, you can't really see anything once everything's all together, except for this portion up. But once everything is off, and kind of for peace of mind, it's gonna be a lot cleaner, a lot more of a more professional finish by doing it this way. Without further ado, we're gonna start marking off with a little Sharpie onto the steel 9x3 plates, 9 inches wide, 3 inches wide, 9 inches tall, however you want to calculate it, whatever, 9x3. And I'm cutting those out right now, and then showing you exactly how we're gonna cut the end caps on the frame. All right, so if you guys have seen my past videos, and you already know that this is basically my mobile workbench. I have it clamped on with a little vice grip clamp thing, and you can see right here, 3 inches, 3 inches, 9 inches, 9 inches. Now, if you look at that and then you look at this, it's gonna be like a huge difference, because you have about 1.5 inches that you're gonna be cutting off those ears. Don't get scared, that's exactly how we want it to be. And you can see that I went over one of the lines just to make it a little bit straighter. But I'm gonna set it right now on the camera mount and then start cutting. Okay, there we have 2 9x3 inch plates. Now obviously this isn't the exact same measurement just because error of cutting and whatnot, but it is super close. You can see the overlay is almost perfect right there. Length is pretty much the same. Now with the flat disc, which is basically the same thing as the cutting one, just with a little bit of sandpaper on the edge, we're gonna clean up all the corners, make sure that none of this is anything that is sharp enough to get cut. And once we're done with that, we're actually going to sand back the area with that same flap disc to make it nice and adhesible for the weld. So it's a nice clean weld, and we can get to cutting the ears off of the frame ends afterwards. All right, got a little late last night. As I was doing all the cutting, and I didn't want to wake up my neighbors any more than they already were with all the noise I was making. So this is basically the ground off front plate. It's ground off on the back as well, so it's good contact once we weld it. And I went ahead and drilled a hole in both the plates. That way it not only lines up where it wants to be for the rest, and it can kind of hold it in place when we weld, but it can also still have the headlight bracket that you guys saw us making a couple videos ago. Next thing that we're going to do right now, basically this is a new flap disc that I'm going to use to cut. I'm going to go ahead and cut along the outside right over here. And I might just keep a hairline over, that way I can shape it a little with the flap disc. And you can see some gaps like right there. It's because the front layer right there has more of like an, it clears a little bit more on the inside. The back layer right there, because it's two stamped pieces of sheet metal from the frame, is a little bit more outside. So once we cut this in with a little hammer, I'm gonna be able to hammer it in. And before we do the final welding, I'm gonna go with a wire wheel and clean up 100% of whatever's left, exactly how we're gonna weld it on. Camera cut off midway on the other side, but not too shabby. Looks pretty good on both sides. Now I just got to clean it up. And before I actually do that, I have to weld on another nut, because you guys know that the OEM nuts are welded right there for the traction bar. I just got to weld on another one. Pretty basic, just gonna tack it on a couple sides of this nut. I'm not gonna record that, but it's pretty good right there. Just got to clean up the insides, outsides, and get it ready to get welded. All right, so we have all the surfaces cleaned up exactly where we're gonna weld. Got my welder turned on right now, and we're gonna give it a little tack weld. I'm not 100% sure on how this type of metal and thickness is gonna react to the second heat setting, which is a little bit hotter. But we're gonna give it our best shot for the tack weld and see what we can come up with. And worst case scenario, after it's tacked on, we can always play with the heat a little afterwards. So let's go ahead and just give it a little, kind of uncomfortable, the area where I'm welding from, but hopefully you guys can still see it. Do it right about right there. See if I can get a nice little tack. Is that right there? For the top, I'm actually going to put on a glove because I want to hold the metal back so it's closer to the frame itself, so I can tack it on nice and tight. Woo! Got into the helmet. Look, that's going to be a little too hot for welding the whole thing, so I'm going to put it down a bit. A little more speed. Do a couple more tacks, this time on the top. It's a little better. Yeah, it's much better at the lower heat. There was a slight gap in the back, on the inside of the frame, from plate to the frame itself. Was able to fill it in with a little bit of weld right there, and now there is going to be a little bit of splatter onto the body itself, but since we're not done with the body work, I already talked to Vince and he's going to be okay with me welding this on so then we can finish doing the body work after. But it's good that we're doing it now instead of later on once we already have all the body work done, so no splatter contaminates or anything. After about 10 minutes of welding, 5 minutes of grinding with the flap disc, there's still some spots that I couldn't get just because when I cut it, it cut like the sheet metal itself. I might be able to just like get some plain metal and cut it to size and tack it in there and then shape it down, but it looks a lot better than it used to. One thing that I'm working on right now is actually getting clean lines on the ends. You can see there's some spots that I got to go over and weld right there, like little holes, but for the most part, it's like 99% in there. I think I'm also gonna weld up a little bit right here because I got some areas that welded a little bit higher than others, and I wanna weld a bit higher right there so then I can cut it down flush again. And then as for the slag that got onto the engine bay, there's a little bit, not much, not any more that would have affected than what was already gonna need body work anyway, so we're not too worried about that. And when I was grinding, I was trying to angle downwards. You can see where the sparks go, and you can see that's exactly the trajectory of where all the little slag is. So I'm gonna keep on shaping this right now and add a little more weld, and then we can go over to the next one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are pretty much done. I added some more weld on this side as well as in a few pinholes right there. As you can see, it's not perfect. I still have one spot there and there, although that is still penetrated on both sides. It's just not as high as the rest. For this side, I'm not gonna fill that in. This isn't a structural additive. It's gonna help a little with the front of the frame. It's not gonna be prone to bending or cracking when the traction bar gets bolted on the inside, but it's not anything that's really going to be a game changer in structural integrity per se. This is more of just like an aesthetic look. It looks a lot better. Look at this compared to that. Like, it's a game changer right there in my opinion. And yeah, without further ado, I'm actually going to get started on the other side. I'm not going to record this one since you already saw me do that one, but I think it's a good comparison while we're at it to see before and after. I think it really livens up the whole look of the front end. Just got done welding up the second side, and I gotta say, I'm a lot more proud of this side welded than that side, just because I really took my time, and instead of trying to do beads of it, it's so thin that I ended up just doing little spot welds, and you can see laying a spot weld on top of the other spot weld, and it took a lot longer, but there were some areas that it got contaminated and built up like that, and then a little bit like that. But for the most part, it came out pretty good. It's 100% welded all around. There's still some spots like the corners that aren't welded on, but just because there's nothing to back it right there. But I'm gonna start cutting it down and shaping it. And yeah, I'm super happy with how this side came out. Nice. Okay, so we just got done shaping up the second side, the driver's side. And although it didn't come out as clean as the first, obviously you can see that the first one has a lot more like parallelism or whatever you want to call it. It's a lot straighter. This one is still a little cockeyed to the left on the top left corner, and then it kind of curves inwards on this, but I think that's just the way that the frame rail was designed. And noticing something right now, I could probably build up a little bit of weld right here, because when I was grinding down, I went a little too aggressive and it cut through the front plate. So I need a little bit more right there. If anything, I'll add that in a little bit, but she's looking pretty good. All right, now I'm gonna clean up the area because it's an absolute mess, and you guys know that I like to let you guys know that it's better to work in a clean environment. That way you have less clutter and whatnot. So we're gonna get this cleaned up real quick and show you the next step. All right, guys, that pretty much does wrap up the frame end caps that we made. I'm keeping the plastic underneath just because once we go to redo the bodywork and spray a little bit more primer, I don't want it to get to the bottom, so we're saving that. But aside from that, we did clean up the whole work area right here. It's nice and clean, swept it up and everything. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that came out, I'm not gonna lie. If I had to redo it and do something different, then I'd say maybe instead of doing 9x3, I'd do like 9 1/4 by 3 1/4, just to have that extra little bit of meat to shape it exactly where you want it. In this case, I would have gone out a little bit more and then been able to bend in the sides, or maybe just play with it and do it more like I did on this side, that I did one weld at a time. And I think this one came out a little better, but that one was a little straighter. So yeah, I'd say add a little bit more meat on the top and on the sides just to get a little bit better shapeability on it. But aside from that, I am really happy with how it came out. If you guys remember at the beginning of the video, that was just absolutely atrocious, just having the ears on the side and unnecessary, you know, an unnecessary rough look. Kind of similar to this right here. You have a little bit of a rough look right there, and I might end up cutting that, for example. If I do, then perfect. If I don't, then whatever. But it just looks a lot neater to have it boxed in. If you do have any more questions regarding this whole video, make sure to shoot me a DM on Instagram @SlowIntegra, and I'll be able to have a one-on-one conversation with you and be able to show you exactly how I did it, or maybe help guide you along the way. Right now, I'm gonna go inside and take a shower because I am super dirty from all this grinding and cutting. And aside from that, we are pretty much wrapped up for today. If you aren't subscribed already, make sure to hit the subscribe and notification bell. Keep on to date with La Fea as well as La Vader. The next video is probably gonna be doing the notching on the block for the CRX, so make sure to stay tuned for that one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one, guys. Peace.